Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the By the Minute Arsenal podcast with me, Matt H, and also Matt V. Hello, Matt.
Hello, good evening. A point on the board is progress. Hopefully, our podcast will also progress from last week.
It is, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. I'm going to own up and say we've just done a podcast which I completely messed up the recording on. So Matt is being very polite and very nice, but we're going to try and get this better this time. And it's all part of our learning process, which we're hoping is, maybe that will transmit itself to the team at some point. But let's crack on with it because we've already done it once. I feel guilty enough anyway. So the Leicester game away to the champions drew 0-0. Not a game of massive amount of action, really, but there were some positive signs. I mean, I thought we did very well in the first half, for example, although, as I mentioned earlier, I also thought we did well in the first half against Liverpool and then things went very quickly downhill. But what were your thoughts on that game?
I think we did string a more consistent performance together, specifically in defence. I think a lot of that was down to Koscielny. He made a great few last-ditch tackles, and I think his presence sort of calmed the rest of the back four. In particular, I'd imagine Rob Holding benefited a lot from playing alongside him and not Callum Chambers. And then I thought we actually had a midfield this week, which was nice. The first 15 minutes of the second half against Liverpool, we were overrun, but Xhaka and Coquelin stuck at their task solidly. Did just enough to avoid getting sent off, did Coquelin.
Yes.
I think a point away to champions by itself is a good point. I don't think any Arsenal fans are in particular frustrated about that performance. I think it's more obviously any wider issues.
Yeah, it's a sort of a cumulative effect, isn't it? With what may or may not have happened in the transfer market, or indeed may not have happened. We can just say with Arsenal in the simplest. We don't need to say it hasn't happened and probably won't. But yeah, I mean, I thought defence looked great. I think Koscielny obviously didn't just come back and play well. He was the man of the match, I think, certainly from an Arsenal point of view. Mm-hmm. Holding, I think, does look good. It'll be interesting to see if he maintains that spot. But from that evidence, I can't see any reason why not. The things I noticed were how good the first half was until we looked very good. We looked very comfortable. But this Arsenal team, for years now, there's been periods in any season where you think, I can't feel comfortable. And it sounds silly when the team will always end up at the right end of the table, not quite at the very right end of the table like we'd like, but to have a team that actually a lot of the time you're still not really sure if what's going to happen with it. But they looked all right. I think there's a bit of rust around Monreal, who I said before, I think has been one of our best players for a long time. Mm-hmm. But this is why we don't hide. I'm not hiding the fact that we messed up. I messed up the recording earlier because I know we've discussed this once already. So it sounds. I'll try and keep it sort of more genuine. But I thought Sanchez looked a bit rusty, but you made a better point really about the where he's playing in the side.
Yeah, obviously when he first came in his first season, he scored a lot of goals coming off the left-hand side. He's started up front the first two games, not, I'd imagine, because Wenger sees him as the solution, but more because we have no one else.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem to suit his style of play. He likes to always be involved with the play, so we saw him drop deep a lot of the time to get the ball, and that obviously left Morgan and Huth with no one to mark. So when we do have a striker, whether it be a new striker or Giroud when he's back, I think we'll be a lot more balanced overall.
Yeah, and as I said previously, I think the lineup is starting to move towards what we might think of as our first choice lineup, even with obviously the fact there's some longer term injuries. Obviously Mertesacker and Ramsey and others, but I think you get Giroud in, you move Sanchez to somewhere he's better. You mentioned when we did this earlier about Ozil looking very good, and we also thought Wiltshire had looked very good in the relatively brief period when he comes on. He doesn't play himself into the game; he's straight in. And I actually thought looked slightly less reckless than he sometimes does.
Yeah,
But
I,
whether that, yeah,
I wonder if he's looked at Xhaka from the sidelines last week and thought, "Oh, I wonder if I look like that when I'm on the pitch. Maybe I could be a bit more calm." But I think when he's in centre midfield, he obviously offers us a lot more with the ball, picking it up. He likes to take on people, good pass and distribution. Um, so I think I'd prefer to see him play as opposed to having both Xhaka and Coquelin, which probably limits us going forward.
yeah. It was a good game for him to come back, I suppose, but particularly at that time because it was quite low key. It was almost. I mean, I had one of those moments with about 20 minutes to go, and I thought this is going to be 0-0, more in hope than anything else. And there were obviously moments where it may not have ended up 0-0, but
Mm-hmm.
it was almost as if the players there wasn't quite that intensity that you might have got in some games. So yeah, I mean, it didn't seem quite at the level of the Liverpool game, for example.
No.
Sorry, random thing that just come up. Of course, Liverpool have that result against us. They're 4-1 up after a certain point, and then they concede 2 goals to us, and then lose away at Burnley, who I don't think anyone was really expecting to have a great season.
I know.
So it's,
Crazy.
it's a mental it's an odd season already. The penalties we need to mention, the penalty shouts, neither of which were for Arsenal, although they ended up being advantageous for Arsenal. So the first one at the end of the first half, just as I'd written on my notes how good Arsenal were looking, they gave that penalty. Sorry, there was a potential for a penalty, but we seem to agree. Well, maybe we're agreeing with the referee in that it was a pretty good decision not to give that. But the second one, we towards the end of the second half, we were not so. I certainly we weren't so comfortable with that one.
No, I think it was Bellerin. I think
Yeah.
the wrong side of his man and still went for the tackle and tripped him up from behind, which seemed a clear penalty at the first take, probably an even clearer one at the second
Yes,
take.
it didn't get any better, did it? For an
No,
Arsenal,
and one which Robbie Savage got quite carried away with.
Well,
As he did with the first one, proclaiming that the first one was a penalty and refusing to take back that view, even when all the video suggested otherwise.
he did stick with it for a while, didn't he? I think he may have changed. Someone may have had a word over half time, I think.
Do you think Howard Webb?
They've got to give Howard something to do.
True.
I think I may be misremembering it, but I thought I heard something at some point in the second half where Robbie Savage was congratulating the referee on the right decision.
Right.
But Glenn Hoddle, who I don't necessarily have much time for as a commentator, I think he actually hit the nail on the head with the first one, where he said, "Look, we've had 3 different opinions, 3 different views. We can't decide, and if the referee isn't sure, then he can't give the penalty." And that was a pretty good summation of where they were. Although obviously Robbie was still carrying on for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it was one of those where when you first look at it, you're not sure because obviously there's no distance at all between Koscielny touching the ball or Koscielny going through the man. At first, I probably thought we got away with one, but obviously the replay suggested it was a great tackle from Koscielny, and it shows how hard a job Clattenburg would have had to get that one right.
Yeah, and the second one though, as you mentioned previously, the second one had that odd thing of even if it hadn't been a penalty, you would have thought it looked like one to the ref. So it was an escape, as was the free kick at the end, which actually didn't turn out to be anything. But I just had that, the opposition has a free kick. You're past the end of injury time. It's just on the edge of your box. I know they always say it's difficult to get it up and over from that distance, but
Still fear the worst.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel any better when I'm watching it. So, okay, well, as we've been over the Leicester game a couple of times now, and to be frank, it wasn't that exciting a game, to be honest. But we'll take the point. It's a point on the board. There is a worry for me that 3 of the big teams, United, City, and Chelsea, have all started with 2 wins. Chelsea's perhaps slightly fortuitously coming back from within the last 10 minutes to get their win, which we'll come to later on at Watford. But we are where we are. So that's a point in the bag at least. So we've started the climb up the table.
We have, slowly but surely. I do fear already being 5 points behind, well, both Manchester clubs, but in particular United and Mourinho. They've shown Mourinho's sides do start quickly, but more importantly, when they are in front post-Christmas, they're very good at sort of grinding out wins and doing what they need to do. So giving them any sort of advantage is not ideal at all.
Yeah, I know what you mean. My only other thing with Mourinho was I thought that he'd had this whole big thing where he said he was going to be more, I can't remember what the phrase, but more gentlemanly, basically,
Right.
But as he understood that Man United job was a big job now, but he still seems to be the same kind of git as he has been. So I'm sure.
Yeah, there's nothing likable.
No, not to me, no, not to you, not to many of people in red and white, I suppose. But anyway, yeah, you don't want to give him a 5-point lead, absolutely, but perhaps he'll be gone by October again, although somehow I doubt it.
I hope so.
I doubt it this time. So yeah, let's leave the Leicester games specifically because I said there wasn't anything particularly thrilling about it, really.
No.
We did have a couple of questions. So we had one from someone on Twitter, essentially asking why Arsene Wenger hasn't spent any money, and we were of a similar mind when we discussed this, which essentially is that Arsene, we think, because he's got so much power, because he's got so much authority in the club, it really is a thing that he really doesn't believe the value's there, and he doesn't want to just buy players for the sake of it. And we're told, if we're to believe it, that there's plenty of cash around for him to splash out. But I think what we're seeing is what we're getting, if I can use that phrase. I think the way he puts it is, we're not going to buy a player because we don't need one, or it's not worth the money, or there's no value. And I think that's probably genuinely it. When you've given him that kind of power, there's no director of football, there's no, the board just let him get on with it because he's bringing the money in every year. I mean, you made a good point though about the idea that this sort of one-man crusade.
Yeah, he seems to be on this crusade completely by himself to restore a sense of sanity and value to the transfer window, which come in after the likes of Higuain for 80 odd million, Pogba for 100 and whatever. Clearly, value is long gone, and I always feel with Arsene, when he does sign a player, he also looks at what he can then sell them on for if he has to in the future. And so buying sort of somebody in their late 20s, early 30s for 30 million to him doesn't seem a great move.
No.
But in particular in defence, I do think we desperately need, and did at the beginning of the summer, even if it is just a stopgap, we need somebody in there. Hopefully that is Mustafi, but who knows with how long that's been dragging on for.
Who knows? We've got a week or so obviously we'll be back to do one of these after the Watford game. So We'll see if there's been any movement there. It did occur to me, of course, we then won't have one for a couple of weeks because of the international break. But of course, we can always do a little special if we sign,
of course,
3 international strikers.
Oh, if Griezmann comes in, I'm ringing you up straight away.
Exactly. We don't care if anyone's listening at all. We'll just do it because that will be so nice. So I think we'll bear that in mind as a potential, but we won't hold our breaths at the same time. You also had we had a question from another reader or listener.
We did about the substitutions Arsenal make or don't make until the 70th or 69th minute, I think it is, which is a pattern we do see with Wenger. Does seem to leave his substitutions barring injuries until sort of 20 minutes to go, which on one hand does show faith to the players on the pitch, but is also, you'd imagine, to the detriment of the players who come on, doesn't give them a lot of time to influence the game.
Yeah, I think this is in the same kind of lineage, if you like, of the reluctance to spend money at the transfer fee. It's that faith in his own ability as a manager, if you like, to pick the team to go and win a game, and I think faith in the players. And I think there's a lot to be lauded for that. I mean, I don't think he's ever, off the top of my head, I don't remember ever really criticising a player in the way that some managers have occasionally done after a game. And I think this is an extension of that. He just thinks they're the people on the pitch, and they're the ones who need to do the job. There's a frustration though, and I've felt it. I've seen it when I've been at the ground. You see it when you watch TV. I say my wife, who doesn't care about any of this. She's noticed it, and this idea of not making the changes until that. But if people are noticing it like that, then there's something going on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily want the whole Mourinho used to. I don't know if he did it regularly or not, but he used to 3 changes at half time in his first Chelsea stint, and that was quite a thing. But you wonder if that's someone just trying to set a marker down a little bit like Guardiola with Joe Hart, actually. That kind of, he's at Man City, who I think are title favourites. There's not much he wants to change particularly, but one of the things he can do to make a point is, Hart doesn't play in the same way as Manuel Neuer does, so he's on the bench. And I'm no fan of Hart, but he seems like a pretty decent keeper. I'm mildly surprised, that he's done it that way. So I suppose it's about managers setting their imprint on the team, and unfortunately for us that means not making any changes until the 70th minute. But there
were rumours about Hart and Guardiola, that Guardiola is in fact getting rid of Hart so he can use that money to give the cleaners at Man City a pay rise. They are obviously the priority for most managers.
This is, yes, you made the you raised the point earlier about the Arsene in his odd press about going back to the bit about the transfers, how he seems to be blaming the press for winding up the fans, which I think might be a little simplistic. And yes, then of course this resignation letter from this Arsenal employee at the club shop in Comic Sans, which we both decided was a very bad thing anyway. But it made an amusing point. But does that I think that comment though, that press conference stuff, is that show that Wenger's under some pressure, or he's just bored with hearing this kind of thing all the time?
I think when he's getting frustrated, he does sort of go into his shell and does see it as though everybody is against him and the team, which isn't the case, I don't think. I don't think the fans do blindly believe whatever the press say. I think the fans are making a judgment on what they see on the pitch. And I think we give credit, most fans give credit when it's deserved. It doesn't necessarily need to be huge money signings. I think a lot of fans were impressed with El Neni at the back end of last season. He obviously didn't cost too much, and Holding has a lot of potential. But I do think, Wenger does get extremely frustrated when he sort of sees people as telling him how to do his job. And we've spoken before about his stubborn nature, and he's certainly not going to give in to anyone telling him what to do.
No, which I suppose is admirable in many ways, but it's easier to accept all this stuff when there are trophies at the end of it, when you win the cup a couple of times and it doesn't actually give you that much help, as it turns out, but it at least makes the summer a bit more palatable for people, at least until the transfer window opens, and then you're just waiting around to see what happens. But okay, so those are the questions. We've done the Leicester game, so very quickly then, Watford. So Watford and Arsenal play this Saturday at 3:00 at Watford. It's 13th against 14th in the table. Very similar records. Both teams have drawn one and lost one. Watford's defeat, of course, came just this week where they were leading against Chelsea with 10 minutes to go, and not only because they couldn't quite hold on to the point, but they conceded a second goal to lose the game. Mm-hmm. We would love, obviously, to go into then the short international break with 3 points to put us to the dizzying heights of mid-table.
Yes.
We shouldn't we, if we're going to be challengers for the business end of things?
Yeah, a sort of must-win game, relegation 6-pointer. It does. Watford's main threat last season, I guess, was Deeney and Igalo, and I don't think either of them have scored so far. It on paper is a game we should go and comfortably win. I don't see Watford as one of those grounds that we fear or that we particularly dread going to. Hopefully, by the time the game comes around on Saturday, the likes of Ozil and Giroud would have had a good week of training and be ready to start. Koscielny would have improved his fitness, hopefully have avoided any injuries. And our last game before the international break, hopefully we'll be pretty much full strength, putting a good performance. Otherwise, it's going to be a miserable 2 weeks in between.
It is, very. And apart from obviously our our excitable, transfer podcast, which we'll need to do when we've signed, these 3 or 4 players. Yes, it would be a long 2 weeks. If that doesn't work out.
I do think. Well, predictions are dangerous, but I do think we will win. I think we showed enough yesterday, certainly in defence, but also when the likes of Ozil came on, we were creating chances. On another day, I'm sure we will take them.
Yeah,
we can keep that sort of solidity at the back. I think we should be fine.
I think building from the back forwards, particularly after the Liverpool shambles, is very important, and I think we get the right midfielders in place. I like Giroud. I've always liked Giroud. I think it's like the Dark Knight thing. Is he the person we want? Nobody's the person we need at the moment, because compared to nothing, he's what we need. And he's a perfectly good goal scorer. He perhaps isn't quite that very top level, as we've heard a million times, but he can convert lots of chances when if he's in form. I suppose what I don't mean to convert lots of chances. I mean, he seems to be able to score quite a few different types of goal. Obviously his head, he can turn on the ball, he can run onto it and finish it. I think he's a very good player. He's very intelligent, gets in the right kind of spots as well. So yeah, I'd love to see him from the start, assuming he's fit. I don't want him to be doing it if he's not ready for it. But yes, that would be great if if he can start, B, if maybe Özil can start, assuming it all works for them, and C, the win, which would be even lovelier to go into that international break with.
What I don't want to see is Giroud or Ozil apparently not fit for the Watford game, and then off they go on the international break, playing their 90 minutes away to Armenia or whatever.
Yeah, that would be disappointing, and that is something that I think Arsene Wenger, I'm pretty much with him on that. We may not agree on everything, but I think that the way that the international stuff seems to still have a priority, even when it's it's patently not right for the individuals involved. There's got to be a balance there, and some international managers seem to be aware of that, and some seem to be able to sort of say, yeah, we'll just play him for 45 minutes or whatever. But I don't understand why some don't care and say, no, we're playing him for 90 minutes in this meaningless whatever. But there you go. It's fingers crossed in the lead up to the game and afterwards to make sure.
I don't imagine Sam Allardyce is going to be too worried about Theo Walcott's well-being.
No, to be honest, I'm not particularly worried about Theo Walcott.
I think you can have him. He can play all the game.
Yeah, he can have it. He can do extra time. He can do everything, even if you don't need
him on penalties as well, I say.
Well, although obviously bear in mind that might not work well given the Liverpool outcome. But there we go. All right then. Well, we will leave it there. There may be 3 of us next week, so that'll be even more people to disappoint when I mess up my recording. But thank you again for your patience, Matt, and thank you for doing this podcast.
Okay, thank you very much. I look forward to having multiple signings to brag about next time we speak.
Well, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? And then again the week after, of course, because the window will still be open.
Bring it on.
All right, well, thank you very much to Matt, and thank you for listening, and take care, and we will speak to you soon.